Last month, I discovered a beautiful island starter seed and decided to build up a rustic and friendly village on a tropical island. During the first episode, I terraformed the island, journeyed out and explored the world around me, set up a bunch of villagers for trading, and built the first hut on the island. I had plenty of name tags from mine shafts and exploration, so I decided to use them on my pets. First, I name tagged my cats Walnut and Papaya. I asked you guys to name my birds, and thanks to the comments, they will now be known as Sonic and Tails. Thank you to Connor and Liam for their names. After taking care of a few chores around the base, I packed my inventory for a long adventure and set out in search of a few very specific items. I was very surprised when the first thing I found was a desert temple. I don't know why it didn't occur to me because the entire area around my island base is desert and badlands and warm areas, but it was still a surprise. I set down a bed so I could set my spawn, and I went right in to find the treasure at the bottom of one of these temples, which can sometimes be really good and sometimes a disappointment. But I wasn't expecting the temple at all, so it was already great. As I was lighting up the main room, I found some suspicious sand, and I entirely forgot that this sand was in the temple now, so I didn't have a brush on hand. I don't know what I was thinking. I was fairly prepared for the trip, or at least I thought I was, but I hadn't put a brush in my inventory. I got to the bottom of the desert temple and looked into the chests. They weren't bad. It's actually kind of nice to get a bunch of gold because gold is actually worth more than I used to think it was because you can use it for trading and bartering with piglins in the nether. I was also happy to get a diamond. Those are never bad, so I picked everything up. And even the dynamite at the bottom of these desert temples can be really valuable, particularly when you go searching for netherite. As I climbed back out of the temple, I was thinking it might be worthwhile to go ahead and make myself a brush so that we could go through the suspicious sand that was there. So that's exactly what I did. All that you need for a brush is a stick, super easy to find, a feather, which is pretty easy if you can locate a chicken, and those are fairly easy to find. The hardest part is the copper. I found a water-filled cave nearby and thought it might be easier to get down a little bit lower, a little deeper, so I could look and dig. And I didn't see anything when I was down there, which was a disappointment, so I swam back up. As I swam back up, I passed a piece of copper on the wall, so I immediately spun around and dropped back down in so I could mine out the copper. I only needed one piece. On the way back to the desert temple, I spotted a well in the desert, and I know that these can have okay, am I the only one that has a hard time saying that word? Suspicious sand in them as well. So I stopped there to copper smelted up and made my first brush so I could use it here at the well, which was nice. I always like getting some of the beautiful patterns. After that, I went straight back to the temple and as carefully as I could started going through the sand in an attempt to find some of the really good suspicious versions so that I could dig up more treasure. I was able to get a few more pottery shards, several emeralds, and even another diamond, so it seemed like it was worthwhile to stop and get a brush made. Besides, I really probably needed a brush while I was out on my journey. While I was in the water just outside of the desert temple, I found some of the ruins, and I thought this would be a really good chance to use that brush I just put together because I definitely still need eggs. I need the beautiful sniffer eggs that you can find in the warm ocean. I was able to find several pieces of suspicious sand right on the surface. I didn't even have to go into the water here, which was great. Picked up some more goodies and no eggs yet, but it was nice to make progress. I also searched for sniffer eggs in a couple other ruin sites that were very nearby. And again, the treasure that comes out of these is good, but sometimes it's actually a little bit lame. And in the end, it didn't give me the sniffer egg. My entire theme, my design, my wish really builds around that beautiful flower that you get from the sniffer. And I just knew I was going to have to find one. I did manage to find a treasure chest map when I was going through the chests and some of the sunken ruins, and it wasn't too far off, so I went ahead and followed it so I could get the treasure from one of these maps. And there are always more treasure in these chests than I remember. I think the sunken treasure mechanism in the game is so fun. I even love the archaeology mechanisms that they've put in place in some more recent updates, and I hope that they continue to add more of that type of thing. It makes exploring in the world even more fun. My world seems to be just entirely covered mostly in warm weather, but I did manage to find a spruce forest. This was the very first that I found in the entire world. I did get the wood last time from a singular tree out in the middle of nowhere, but actually a forest of this beautiful wood. This was the first one I found. I came across several ruined portals when I was out exploring the world, and I always feel really excited to find these. Anytime you find a structure in the world, it seems a little bit special. I'm curious, do you guys like these portals or not? I don't think the treasure is ever very glamorous, but they're kind of interesting. I think I've decided I like them. My next discovery came in the form of beautiful purple flowers. I don't really think I use any of these flowers on the island when I'm decorating it, but they're my favorite flower in the game, so I stocked up. I passed a nearby village. In fact, I think this is the second village as I was wandering around, and the villages didn't have a lot for me. I would pop my head into every single building to see if there was a chest to search for items, but mostly these were empty. The real benefit of the villages comes in finding hay bales. Hay bales are such a good source of wheat, and the wheat is good for trading as well as breeding up animals. So I was really excited to get all of the hay bales I could find in every village I came to. I had been journeying for a couple hours at this point, and so I finally found some cool biomes, and right at the top of a hill, as you could see the ice spike biome behind it, was a cherry blossom forest. This was actually my first cherry blossom forest that I found while I was exploring around my world, and I was particularly excited to find it. I already had the wood from a trader, but I wanted those beautiful flowers. It actually became more beneficial when there was a deep cavern right below the cherry blossom, tiny forest, and it had the dripstone, and it was really easy to crawl in here and get the dripstone. I didn't know it at the time, but I decided to use the dripstone in one of the main pallets I used back on the island, so I'm really glad I took the time to stop and really harvest several stacks of it while I was here and while it was easy. I had been out journeying in my world for a really long time, a couple hours, maybe 3 at this point, but I still kept going even further from spawn because I hadn't found a couple of the things that were most important to me and to the design I had in mind. I wanted my beautiful tropical island to have a lot of vibrant colors to it, and I was helped out a little bit by traders along the way. In fact, I was able to find a couple of them while I was traveling. Mostly I just got beautiful small drip leaf from the traders, which is great because that was also an important part of my journey. And I finally found a flower forest, which was the most disappointing flower set I've ever seen. I really loved the tulips. I was glad to get a bunch of tulips again to add those vibrant colors. I also feel like flowers are a really important part of a tropical landscape, but this entire area just had this tiny little collection of flowers, and then that was it. I made room for the flowers really easily because at this point my inventory was a disaster. It was getting super full, but I had a ton of bundles, and people have really been giving the bundles a hard time, but they are so useful on these big travel adventures. After sorting out the flowers and my inventory, I looked about and literally couldn't find any more. It was just this tiny little patch of tulips. I'm grateful for them. They're definitely going to help on the island, but teeny tiny. I would have been happier had I found more, That find, even though it was small, left me with one more big thing on my wish list for this journey, and that is a mangrove swamp. I absolutely had to find one. Anytime I found a desert village, I would take some of the smooth sandstone, and this particular house had a trap set for me. I stepped on a piece of sand that was just floating in the air. There was nothing underneath of it, which I could not have known. And then, of course, I fell, and there was a big, huge cavern below where I died. Floating pieces of sand are definitively considered bad luck, but at the same time, I had just clicked on one of the beds in the village in just one of the other huts nearby and had no distance to go to find my stuff, which is incredible luck. Which way do we think this one goes? Good luck? Bad luck? Anyhow, I decided to go ahead and break a block so I could get some water to flow down into the area because it was too far just to jump, and that enabled me to float down and get my stuff. I didn't lose anything, which was nice, and it just took a little while to put all of my inventory back into my pocket the way that is organized and makes me happy, so it was more of an annoying side quest. Still, if I'd been playing hardcore or if I hadn't clicked on a bed anytime soon, this would have been a completely different story. Feeling very relieved, I picked up all the hay bales from this village that I was in and continued on my path to find a mangrove forest. It was a large desert, and I felt like I might be dying of thirst. And then, in the distance, the beautiful mangrove trees. Mangrove swamps are good for a lot of amazing resources. Lily pads, for example, I just sort of took my boat and ran over the top of them to pick up a bunch of lily pads, and I love putting these in my water elements. I came around the corner so I could jump into another part of the mangrove forest and saw something over the corner of my eye. I thought I saw another desert temple, but I wasn't sure, so I went off randomly on the most absurd little squirrel direction as you could possibly go, but there it was, another desert temple on thousands of blocks away. So I jumped down really quick to go ahead and pick up resources from down here. My pockets were getting really full and I had a lot of mangrove things still, so I made my final choices and popped back over to continue on what I was doing originally. I harvested up as much mud as I thought I could manage to take home with me in my pockets. I also harvested up the roots, which are very cool, but then I didn't take them with me because I needed room for other things and I can always grow these back home. What I couldn't make back home is the beautiful muddy mangrove roots, and so I did spend a lot of time going to the base of all the trees and mining down so I could bring a few stacks of this beautiful block home with me. After adding the mangrove propagules to my pocket and putting as much in there as I felt like I could manage, I even had to hold my bed in one of my hands and the pickaxe in another hand because my pockets were just that full, and that's with the bundles. With super full brimming pockets and having found everything that I meant to find when I was out journeying, I went ahead and took a straight path back home to my base. I'd had enough journeying, at least for the time being, so it was time to settle in to my base, to some different tasks, and make progress on other goals. The first step, of course, was to empty my pockets from everything I had into the chests in my organization system so that I could see all the treasures that I'd come back with. Next up was to start getting a good supply of the beautiful mangrove wood. I had a lot of bone meal from the journey, so I was able to bone meal up and get, of course, quite a few things from the trees. I picked up a few vines while I was doing this, the roots, of course, those regular roots, and the wood, which was the whole point, of course, of going to find the mangrove forest. Before cutting down the trees, I would use the bone mill on the propagules to make sure they were fully grown, which is the best way of making sure you actually get that propagule. If you cut the tree down too fast, sometimes it doesn't have enough or any of the propagules, or they're not fully grown. So just a little tip on mangrove trees. Next chore was to go down below and harvest up a bunch of sugarcane from where I had it growing. Next up was to use those wonderful hay bales I found at all the villages while I was out exploring. One of the big things I did was stop by my farmer and trade out as much wheat as I could for emeralds that I could use to get other things. Like armor. I also found a lot of pumpkins and melons while I was out walking around, so I was able to trade those out for emeralds too, which was a lot within just a quick couple of trades. I also used the wheat to breed up all of my sheep and my cows, and I did this several times as often as the game lets me breed them up because I needed a lot of books. I started repeating the process using the bone mill to grow up the garden as fast as I could manage, harvest up all the wonderful stuff, and then take it down to do more trades with the villagers for more emeralds. The desert temples had given me a lot of bones that I found in chests, as well as all of the underground ruins and structures, which I had come across a lot of. And again, as I was searching for the eggs, those beautiful sniffer eggs. At this point in the game, it was all about emeralds and emerald production, because emeralds meant armor and tools, and I was ready to get fully geared up in this game. Gearing up when you have villagers means lots of trading, and the unfortunate task of rolling for trades. To begin with, I needed to get mending on one of these librarian villagers. I also need unbreaking, hopefully efficiency. You need feather falling if you can manage it. Protection for sure is a really important one. I mean, there are just so many of them that I like to have on my armor and my tools. You can use a combination of enchanting and villagers, but at this point I had so many villagers that were bred up and down here and ready to go, I figured I might as well just go for it and try and get all of the books that I wanted. I put on a good show and spent about an hour rolling villagers before I realized I should probably change things up a little bit to make it easier for myself. So in particular, it would be really nice to have more books. More books meant more area to grow out the sugarcane, and I needed more room for villagers. So I did two things at once. I took the sugarcane out from down here where it was convenient for sure, but it gave me more room to breed up even more villagers. More villagers would mean more room for farmers and other types of villagers for trading. Hopefully I could get emeralds up faster, and then with more emeralds I could evolve the villagers, level them up so I could get what I was looking for at a faster rate. I moved the sugarcane to the beach where it would be ugly but more productive. I had a pretty good sized watermelon patch, and that was giving me a lot to trade in with the farmer villagers in my quest for more emeralds. And I loved that, but I decided I needed even more room to farm, more room than I would end up keeping on the island. Just what I needed for now as I was trying to get all the villagers upgraded. I try to do most of my recording when it's daytime and it's not raining, but it actually rains a lot in my world. And let's face it, it's night for half of the time. So I decided to put this clip in where it's just me building more farms. I'm working at night in the rain, and I haven't slept in so many days that the phantoms start to attack me, and I have to take care of them before I can get back to all the work of building up extra farms to trade with the villagers. Sometimes Minecraft is just a true grind, which I really love about it. I actually do love a really good grindy game. I'll probably need this phantom membrane for potions in the future anyhow, so I didn't worry about it too much. As part of my villager grinding process, I also decided to go ahead and take the villagers who had been wandering about my basement however they wanted to, and to block them into little homes. This is infinitely frustrating, but actually pretty worth it once you get all the villagers set so they're right where you need them to be to come back and make progress. It's completely unnecessary to put beds in each of the places, but I decided I was going to add beds anyhow, and I bred them up even further, and then I was able to break the beds to help move the villagers into the spots that I wanted. This whole time I was working to organize the villagers, I was also stopping periodically to go over to the other island. There's 2 big islands that I'm working on, one big main island for the village, and the second one, which I'll talk about in episode 3. Over for now, I had all of my animals: sheep, cows, pigs, chickens, and I definitely needed to breed up the cows as often as I could because I was trying to get more books so I could level up villagers and get enchanting and all the different things to get the villagers where I want them to go. I also wanted to make sure that I was shearing the sheep so I could get wool in different colors. I hadn't decided what I was going to do to build up all the little huts yet, and I felt like I was going to need a lot of wool, even though I didn't end up using a ton in the end. At this point in time, I thought I needed a bunch. It was finally time to start adding a little bit more decoration, building, and aesthetics to the front of this hut that I've been working on, and I started putting together a palette for the path that I wanted in front. I decided to use a combination of rooted dirt, coarse dirt, and packed mud. Eventually, I add the dripstone in as well, but I hadn't done that yet. My goal for the path was to make it look like a worn dirt path. I wanted it to look natural, and so that was kind of what the combination was going for. I also made a really big decision. This oak tree was the very first oak tree on the island. As the starter, I really wanted to save it, but it really doesn't look natural or normal for a tropical island. I made the decision to let it go. I also made the decision that it was time to take all those animals that I had been going all the way over to breed and move them closer to home so it was easier to manage them and maybe put them where they were going to live forever. I decided to put a little bit of a barn, kind of a rustic, jungly barn, next to the hut, right where I go in and out all the time, and to move the animals over into their forever home. I spent a little time playing around with some different color combinations, figuring out how I wanted the village to look. I knew I wanted this beautiful little covered barn area, but I didn't want it to look too much like a farm barn. By giving it a thatched roof, keeping it a really open space, and by kind of adding in some color, I think I managed to put together a really good shelter for the cows that didn't look like it didn't fit on the island theme. I put together a combination of mud, rooted mud, and even a little bit of cobblestone deep slate because I just really liked the way that the colors worked together to be the base where the animals were going to live. My next step was to connect the path over from the hut I already put together to where I'm going to put the animals. I figure at least as I'm adding things in, I should at least connect them. Connecting builds with paths is a really good way of making the world feel cohesive and is definitely something I always strive to do, no matter what type of build or what type of world I'm working in. I continued getting the area ready for the animals by adding a little greenery, just some bushes around the stables, and then by taking some bone meal and building up lots of extra grass and putting in a few extra flowers. The next step was to bring the cows on over. Not all of them, just a few to kind of get the herd growing again. I still needed a lot of leather, so the rest of the cows, well, they met a different fate. With all the animals squared away, it was time to start figuring out the layout. It was important to me to put together the base of where all the huts were going to go in the island and kind of figure out where the path was going to be before I went any further. I created a small little place next to the cows for the sheep with some grass, and I took the pigs and made a pen for them, at least a few of them, just kind of in the middle of the island where I'll put a house later. Same thing with the chickens. I just kind of picked a spot and decided to build around that in the future. The first step was a little bit of a house instead of a hut that I wanted to build just at the base of the path, and I wanted it to incorporate the entrance to my mine below because I kind of have a stairway that goes down when I do all of my strip mining. A lot of things were coming together here at my base, but before I could start building, there were a few supplies that I still needed. So I went ahead and dropped down into my mine so that I could dig up a few resources. While I was mining, I opened up into another cave, someplace I hadn't been before, just even below, and I took out, a few bad guys, no big deal, and was able to drop down in and found a bunch more iron, which was really good. I've needed to mine up iron blocks because in my inventory, I don't have the benefit of an iron farm with the villagers. I know I'm using villagers, but I actually don't have a farm for them. There's a reason for that. I don't think I mentioned it in this series yet, but I decided I wasn't going to do any automatic farming at all in the world. I was going to use villagers and decided to do that and not to do automatic farms, just for the challenge of manually mining and gathering everything I needed. Playing without any automatic farms is actually really fun, and I would recommend it. It's definitely not for everybody, but some people never make automatic farms, so it's fun. There are two main reasons I decided to go with that. The first is that this is supposed to be a little bit of a mini-series. I'm only planning on 3 episodes in this world. Most automatic farms wouldn't be around long enough to be worth the time it takes to make them. The second is that I like changing up the way that I play Minecraft and giving myself challenges because it changes the gameplay from one time to another. It just makes things different and interesting. If you've ever given yourself a challenge in a world before, you'll have to let me know what it is in the comments below, or if you've heard of a cool challenge, because I really enjoy adding those elements to games as I play. Mining was really productive and I had a ton of resources, but that also included a lot of raw iron blocks that I really wanted to break down with fortune. Getting the right enchantments on a pickaxe to get fortune, as well as everything else that I wanted for my armor and my tools, I had most of those now. I had done a lot of rolling and re-rolling and organizing villagers. The problem I had now is that there wasn't enough experience to get enchantments on the gear that I had. So even though I had the enchantment and I had the gear, I couldn't put them together yet. There was a mine shaft that we discovered in episode 1, and I did have a spawner for poison spiders. So I decided to go down and create the fastest, most basic spawner farm for XP that you could possibly imagine. I built a big room around the spawner, and it just wasn't even the full space you would typically build out with an XP farm. Just enough that when the spiders would spawn, they would crawl up, and it was the same width as the room where I was standing, so they would see me and come over. The most important thing to remember with spiders is that the gap have a little bit of a half slab on one of the sides and a trapdoor on the other, because any gap bigger than that and they can get through. I know I just got through saying how I wasn't going to build any automatic farms. Well, I don't know, maybe this one's a little bit in between. There's no real mechanism involved and the spiders just kind of come to me from the spawner. You can decide if I got around my rule or not. I decided to do it, and in the end, it's my game and how I decided to play. Doesn't matter. Here is how I got most of the experience that I needed to get my tools leveled up. Here's a side view of my super creepy, not a farm, my super creepy spider room, where I'm just standing here and the spiders slowly crawl up and come to me. That's the end of the mechanism that I use. It was effective for putting my experience over the top for what I needed, though, so I do kind of recommend it if you're looking for a solution and you don't want to spend a ton of time putting together an entire farm. With the little bit of a buff of XP from the spiders, I was able to get the enchantments that I wanted onto my armor and my tools so that I could finally be geared up in this world, which always feels like a huge advancement. Now that I had a fortune pickaxe, it was time to stack up the resources and see what I was able to get from this mining trip. Now that I was all geared up, it was time for the most important mission of the game yet, and that was the inevitable search for a sniffer egg. Up until this point, I refused to do any more building until I was able to get sniffers so that I could get the flowers because they were what I most wanted to put into my village. The thing is, my island, my 2 islands where my base is in the middle, literally, of an epic warm ocean. No, it's not a warm ocean, it's a hot ocean, full of coral beds everywhere. These coral reefs are beautiful and I love them, but it also meant that finding a sniffer egg should be pretty easy. And yet, I had used a brush to dig up so much suspicious sand already, very near where I'm based. I had tried so many times to find what I was looking for, and the only thing that was holding me back from a couple locations is that I'd run into a couple of trident throwing drowns, which were much too strong for me. At this point, they weren't too strong at all. I was fully geared up. My diamond gear and everything was completely enchanted, and a little bit of a trident wasn't going to be a problem for me at all anymore, so I was off. Before leaving on the journey to get the sniffer egg, I had stocked up on everything I could possibly think of to go on the longest journey yet in the game because it had already been so hard to find one egg, and I really wanted two. For my heavily prepared trip, I went off in a different direction than I'd been going as I was journeying in the world and started digging up all the sand that I could find. To my surprise, I'd only been out for maybe 15 minutes before I discovered my first epic sniffer egg. I was so excited. I raided a sunken ship and was able to pick up some good resources there, and then went to the very next set of underwater ruins, and to my surprise,
wow!
Just like that, I had my second egg, and I hadn't even been out for a half hour, which was way less time than I was expecting. I had barely done any building on the island at this point, and I already loved the way it looked as I drove my boat back and got ready to put these sniffers down. I just dropped in a little bit of moss because the sniffer eggs actually hatch quicker if you put them on moss. The eggs are big and brilliant and beautiful and take forever to hatch and even longer for the sniffers to grow, so it seemed like a really good time to get down to some building. After building just 2 new structures on the island, I was completely out of bamboo, and I really wanted bamboo to be part of the roof of all of the huts across the entire island. I thought about planting bamboo and letting it grow and harvesting it right there where the main base is, but in the end, the bamboo island, the jungle over here, was pretty close by. It was easier just to travel over, harvest a bunch of bamboo, convert it into bamboo blocks, and take it back. And while I was there, I went ahead and got a little bit more jungle wood while I was at it, because I was definitely going to need more of that too. Is it just me, or does anybody else love the sound of harvesting bamboo? I love the little click, click, click that it makes. Probably my favorite sound in Minecraft. I also made up some shears while I was over in the jungle because I needed to harvest a bunch of jungle leaves. The jungle leaves are the main leaf that I'm using for all the palm trees on the island, and certainly for the jungle trees, the ones that I do just myself. The jungle is also a great place for oak leaves because they just sit on the ground in these little bushes everywhere, and a little extra grass is fine, so I just kind of took the shears and went crazy nuts everywhere. I moved far enough into the jungle harvesting things that I came upon a jungle temple, which was crazy. I had been through this jungle so many times. I can't believe that I missed the jungle temple on all the other passes. But let's face it, they're kind of odd structures and they don't really have a lot in them. It's actually kind of sad because I think jungle temples could be pretty phenomenal structures if they had just maybe a little more attention given to them. Regardless, it was a fun little interruption into my process as I was harvesting up leaves and all of the bamboo that I could carry in one trip back to my base. I went around the corner of the beach and found turtles. Now, I'd seen turtles a couple other times in the world while I was out exploring, but it dawned on me at this particular moment in time that the turtles would be an amazing way to add life to a tropical island. After harvesting up some seaweed really quickly, I was able to breed the turtles and get them to do eggs here right on the beach. I had a silk touch pickaxe in my pocket, so that was super easy to harvest up the eggs so that I could get several of them to take home. The cool thing about turtles is that wherever they hatch, that's the beach that they will tend to stay on. So all you have to do is use Silk Touch to pick up some eggs. You can take them back to wherever it is that you would like, and then you can have really nice, friendly turtles always kind of hanging out at your beach. Both my inventory and the inventory in the chest in my boat were completely full of bamboo and leaves and turtle eggs and things that I found while I was out and about, and it was time to head home again. I decided to put the turtle eggs down on both beaches. I kind of have two big, beautiful beaches, one on each side of the island. So I put half of them on one and half on the other, and I kind of reserved a couple for just in case something happens, because you never know with turtle eggs. Sometimes, I don't know, a zombie tramples them or something, and I didn't want to lose the opportunity to add turtles to my island. I'd been following my sniffers around on the island, collecting up the two different flowers whenever they found the seeds. The sniffers are so fun. I think they're the neatest addition to the game as far as updates that I've actually seen myself in the years that I've been playing. And I really like the way they kind of sniff around and find flowers, but I need them to not go quite so far away from home. So I decided to make a pin so I could kind of bring them to a unified space and get the flower seeds more easily. I also bred them up so I would have 3 just to make the flowers a little bit more quickly, but also just in case something happened to one of them, I'd still have 2. The torch flowers are exactly what I wanted to make this island look tropical. I wanted to stay close by so that the turtle eggs would be able to grow and hatch, and also so that I could pick up all the seeds from the sniffers on a regular basis. So I started pulling the path down towards the beach and then started working on a really good dock area. Turtle eggs can take a really long time to hatch, and they only hatch at nighttime and they move their way to the water afterwards. So I wanted to be down so I could see them hatch if I was able to catch that, and I was staying up at night so that they would be able to hatch at night when the time came. Staying up at night, of course, means attracting one of the worst pests of the sky, and I found that I had a really hard time working while I was being constantly attacked. So I had no choice. I had to go in and sleep at least one night and then go back to working while I picked up all of the seeds from the sniffers and watched out for the eggs. I was harvesting up the potatoes because I've continued to trade with the villagers, and I heard, that sound, a little sound. And I found the pale oak saplings on a wandering trader. This was the very last type of wood that I needed, so I was really excited to have it. Although it didn't need the pale oak wood for anything. I don't think I used it in the build anywhere, but I was still really excited to have all the different types of wood. Anytime I'm laying out either a large build or multiple builds in one spot, I go through and kind of put the footprints of them down across the whole entire area. That is the process that you see me doing here. I even put in a few smaller things like fields or chicken coops where I know already in advance where I want them to go. I completed the first of the small huts, and this is a design I've used before, and I plan to recreate that design in these same small circular footprints. This is a design I've used before. It's probably my favorite structure design for a small circle, and I knew right away when I was doing this theme that's what I was going to use for most of the island, so you can see all the little circles kind of scattered about. If you've never done this kind of layout before, I highly recommend it. It's just such a good way to see if you've used the space aesthetically in the way that you really intend. This view of my island also gives you a really good feel for where I put the docks, where I've put some rocks in near the beach. It shows you where I have little bitty melon farms and some of the smaller chicken coops, just tiny things like that. The nice thing about the little hut design that I'm putting together is that it's really easy to structure with different blocks and make it look different, but the island will still be cohesive. And the very first step after, of course, this foundation is to bring up pillars, and I'm using stripped spruce for that. After adding all the pillars, I'm going to start filling in the blocks. For these tiny little sides over here, I'm not even going to worry about texturing yet or anything. I'm just going to drop the blocks in place. I am leaving a gap for the windows, and I'm really excited to use the bamboo trapdoors because they seem like a really good fit for a natural open air type of a window. I use the same stripped spruce as the pillars for every single one of the huts, which makes them cohesive. I use the same window bamboo here as the windows, but the blocks that I'm using for the walls, those are going to change each time, and I'll do a little bit of decorative accent on each of them, and that's going to change too. It's really easy to use the trapdoors to kind of do accents in different ways, but the trapdoors for the windows, I want those to be the same. I put an acacia door in all of them. I love how well you can see through that door because, again, I want these huts to look really open. And then I'm using the dark oak as accent, just like I have on the bottom foundation. Next up is the dark oak fences that I'm going to put torches on top of eventually. And those, again, are going to be the same on all of them. For the side of the huts, I'm going to come in with some trapdoors that are some other color. Here I'm using the mangrove, but I'm not going to use the mangrove on all of them. They'll change up a little bit, and that just gives some accent to the side and a little bit of color. You can see the original hut that I built over here. It has the jungle wood in it. It looks like I used the mangrove accent on that one too for the trapdoors, so I will probably change the accent up on this one so that it's a little more unique. The next step is to do a little bit of a dark oak rim, and that's going to go all the way around the outside top edge of the hut. I repeat this process on all the huts across the whole island using different colors and different combinations, and then I come back in after the fact to do a little bit of texturing on the walls. I find that it's easier to do the roofs all at once because I can put all the blocks for the roof in my pocket and it saves on inventory space. So it's kind of a nice thing. So that bamboo roof, you can see I'll do the same thing, but I'll add it in at the same time I do that for all of them. Here you can see I'm going back in and adding a little bit of texturing. This is where I'm putting some sandstone in on the bottom of the birch just so that the wall looks a little different, and it's easy to do this after, but you can also do it while you're building. My choice as to whether or not I am going to texture during the build or after usually depends on what kind of inventory space I have available for the block palette I'm using, so you can do it either way. The next step I choose is to add a floor to the inside of the hut, and I do a different color for each of these. The inside of the huts aren't a huge importance for the build yet, so I'm not worrying about too much texturing. I'm just getting a floor down. This is when I change out the trapdoors so that they have a different color because I don't want them to match the other one that's so close by, although I do use the mangrove trapdoors on other styles and other designs. I just want to make sure I'm changing them up across the island so the huts all look a little bit different from each other. Circle roofs can be so tricky. In fact, they still aggravate me from time to time, but I find that the easiest way to keep them in pace is to bring them up from the four sides first. After that, you can go into each of the quarters and kind of fill them in using the same method each time. After getting all of the huts in place using the very same thing I just showed you, but changing up the style just a little bit each time, it's time to go through and put the path in and just make sure everything is connected. I want this island to look like the villagers live and play outside, right? They do so much of everything in their daily lives on the island together outdoors. They live in a world where technology hasn't discovered them yet, and that it's not a really important part of their lives, right? That it's more of a harmonious village that is rustic, tropical, vibrant, full of really happy villager people. These are all the kind of things that I keep in mind when I'm deciding what type of decorations to create. And at the moment, I'm digging all the way down so I can create a well. As I think about the people and what they would do, what they would need, I realize that all the water around them there's a lot of water, but it would be salt water. It's seawater. And they would need a source of really good drinking water. So that is what I decided to put in first as I was decorating. I decided to leave the well just open and started decorating around with other things, barrels and jars and different chests, things that the people might work on top of. I'm using the bamboo scaffolding to look like little outdoor tables. When you're trying to figure out how to decorate for outdoor decorations, it's really good to think about what the people would actually be doing or having in their lives. And they have these little melon farms everywhere, so the melons are definitely a big part of the food that they would eat. So I'm putting a lot of these little, melon, what do we want to call them? Crates? It's like an imitation crate where there's melon inside of it. They just look cute, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. And it doesn't always have to make perfect sense, just so long as it looks good and it flows and, just kind of makes the people and the villagers look like there's something they work with and do when they're taking a part in their daily lives. I included a spot where it would look like they were taking a rabbit hide and maybe stripping it down to use for leather. I thought that was fun, but I didn't include too many of these because I have a feeling these guys would spend a lot of time fishing, and fish would be a really important part of their diet. I chose to use more outdoor decorations than I typically would, again because it seemed like it was part of the story, that these villagers were spending a lot of their time outdoors, preparing food, gathering food, taking care of villager life. They spend a lot of it outside of their huts. A couple of the villagers have chickens right by their huts, so I did put out a couple of the campfires so I could add chicken to it, just again as a way to look as if they were preparing food. And I don't know that they would eat as much of the chicken as they would the eggs, but it looks good on the campfires. I wanted it to look like they had a variety of foods available to them, but I still included a lot of fish drying racks and various things that show that they're still on an island and would rely a lot on the sea for the goods and things they needed. I also included a few very specific beetroot patches, not a ton, but I really like the way that beetroots look when they're fully grown. They have that red pop of color to them and a really vibrant green, which I thought would fit really well with the tropical vibes. This type of fine detail decorating is so enjoyable. It is really fun to me to just fill my pocket with a lot of random things and find places to just add little bits of detail. And it really brings a build to life a lot when you incorporate these details in. I probably even did more than I usually would, again, for the same reasons I said before, and that is because I feel like these people would spend a lot of their time preparing food and living life outside. I thought that cocoa pods might be a really neat thing to show that the villagers would harvest and use, again, as part of a varied diet. So I added what will eventually be a couple of very tall jungle trees and put ladders that kind of went up the jungle tree to show that maybe they had ladders resting against the tree as they harvested these pretty regularly. The next step was to start adding greenery to the island, which is always a really fun way you start putting life back in. So I decided to start with the cocoa trees. I put some dirt and then a jungle sapling so that a tree would grow up on top of what I had already started. I knew that I really wanted some taller trees towards the middle of the island anyhow, so this was just a really good place to start doing that. After that, I just started moving about and putting saplings down wherever I thought it would be great to have a jungle tree on the island. And I stayed more towards the middle of the island with the actual jungle trees, and I'll do more palm trees towards the outside of the island. Landscaping is the amazing step when everything comes to life. I'm using azalea leaves for bushes as well as the azalea bushes from the moss stuff, the moss as well as moss carpet. I'm using the small drip leaf. I'm using a lot of the flowers, but particularly the torch flower from the sniffers. So all of these things are part of a landscaping palette that I'm putting together for the island. I'm even putting in some of the red bushes from the nether and a lot of the flowers that have the yellow and the red. This palette that I'm using, I want it to be a lot of green, but also to include red, yellow, and orange anywhere that I can. I planted a lot of bamboo, and I used a trick that I saw in a B-Dubs video where he puts a bamboo piece on top of a growing piece of bamboo, so it kind of adds more of that good bushy bamboo leaf to a piece of bamboo. I'm letting some of them grow, but a lot of them, particularly in places where they're very visible in the village, I'm putting string on top to stunt the growth. Palm trees are definitely part of the landscaping palette, and you can see I'm using a lot of the jungle wood as well as the jungle slabs and stairs to build up a little bit more of a natural looking palm tree, kind of crooked a little bit in some places, looking like maybe the wind has been blowing it to the side a little bit. So I don't want it to go just straight up. An easy way that I do the palm trees is by taking dirt and going out in 5 different large branches from the center. And you want some of these to be a little higher or lower so that they're not all on the same level, but then you have a foundation to put the leaves on. This allows you to build up both from the middle and the edges to kind of arc the big palm leaves out in the middle and down towards a little bit of a point at the bottom. I'm mixing in a little bit of oak leaves along with the jungle leaves that I'm using here just to give a little bit of variation and texture to the different leaves. And I really do step back before I'm done and look at the leaves and adjust them accordingly. And then I take out all of the dirt. The process allows me to sort of stay up on top and do a lot of this without having to go dirt and leaf one at a time to build the structure. If you've never created custom trees before, palm trees are actually a really good place to start. I find that they're the easiest and they teach you a little bit of how the leaf works as you put it down. The final step is getting all the villagers moved out of their little cubby holes in the basement of my starter house and into the different huts and spaces around the village because I really want to populate it and make it look and feel alive. I tend to move villagers at night because I can move beds and break beds and move them again and to get the villager into the place I want. I wanted some of these villagers in very specific hut spaces, so bread breaking and moving is definitely the best way to do that. But in the end, villagers are still really obnoxious to move. They also create iron golems when they're out. So I was able to take some of them. I made these big holes, dropped the golems down in, and then covered the holes back over again with grass so that you couldn't see them. All in all, I think there are 3 golems hidden on the island now. The first of these 2 islands is now complete, and I am so excited to walk you guys through. As you leave my starter hut that we built in the previous episode, I just want to walk between these big main buildings and the huts and across the path and the docks here and show you what this island looks like from the villager perspective. Now that all the trees are grown and everything is lush and beautiful and the flowers from the sniffers are just everywhere, you can see how much those little details come together and really bring the village to life. I feel like I've said the phrase, bring it to life, several times in this episode, and there's a reason for that. It's a lot of what we're trying to do as we tell a story of a world. We're trying to bring that world, that creation, to life. We're trying to make it look like it could be real, like it has history, and the villagers and the animals and everything actually live here and work here and exist in the world and environment that we've created. So there's no better phrase that I can think of than bring it to life. I'm so happy with the way that it turned out. It even exceeded what I was imagining in my mind, and all the villagers, now that they're a part of the actual village, they can still be used for trading and various different things. And that's important because in this little mini series, we have one more thing to do, a third and final episode as we take care of the island on the other side. I've got really big plans for that island, and I can't wait to share that with you. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you've made it this far, please do consider subscribing. I'm trying to grow my brand new little channel, and subscribers really do help, and it's free and easy. Just hit that button. I will see all of you guys in the final episode of this mini series, and I wish you all the best. Minecraft Day.